What if the fruits described in the oldest book ever written were not chosen by accident? Not selected because they were abundant, not listed because they were convenient, but specifically named because generation after generation of careful human observation had confirmed that these particular fruits did something to the human body that nothing else quite replicated. The Bible is not a nutrition manual, but woven through its pages, from the first book to the last, is a consistent pattern of specific fruits appearing at the most significant moments in human history. Fruits that were offered as gifts to kings, fruits that were woven into the garments of high priests, fruits that were pressed into oil and used to anoint the sick, fruits that kept armies moving across desert terrain. Today, we are going to walk through 10 of those fruits and look at what modern clinical research has confirmed about each one. Stay with me because number 3 on this list was carved into the pillars of Solomon's temple and is now the subject of active research in oncology laboratories. And number 1 appears more than 500 times in Scripture, and what cardiologists and longevity researchers are discovering about it right now is changing how the most serious scientists in medicine think about the aging heart. 10 fruits, thousands of years of accumulated wisdom. Let us find out what they knew. Number 10, watermelon, the fruit the Israelites wept for in the wilderness. In Numbers 11, the Israelites wandering in the desert reach a breaking point. They have manna and they are mourning what they left behind in Egypt. The list of foods they name is specific: fish, cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, garlic. Watermelon, the melon most likely referenced here, was not a luxury in the ancient Egyptian diet. It was a staple survival food in a hot, arid climate where water sources were unreliable and heat exhaustion was a daily reality. A food that is more than 90% water, that delivers hydration along with nutrients, that grows in desert soil with relatively modest water requirements, was not simply pleasant, it was strategic. Modern research has found something that the ancient world could only have observed through outcomes without understanding the mechanism. Watermelon contains a compound called citrulline found in almost no other food in comparable concentrations. Citrulline is an amino acid that the body converts into arginine, which the body then uses to produce nitric oxide. Nitric oxide relaxes and dilates blood vessels, improving blood flow throughout the circulatory system. Clinical studies have found that watermelon extract supplementation measurably reduces blood pressure, improves arterial flexibility, and reduces muscle soreness after physical exertion. This is not a marginal effect. It is a physiologically significant one. Watermelon also delivers lycopene, the same carotenoid antioxidant found in tomatoes, in concentrations that rival or exceed cooked tomato products. Lycopene has been studied extensively for cardiovascular protection and reduced cancer risk, particularly for prostate cancer in large population studies. The Israelites who mourned watermelon in the wilderness were not being dramatic. Here their bodies understood through direct experience what they were missing. Traditional use was simple: the fresh fruit eaten directly in the heat of the day, the seeds, which were also consumed, providing additional protein and fat. Everything the body needed to stay functional in brutal conditions. Number 9, carob, the fruit of the prodigal son that kept people alive. In Luke 15, Jesus tells the parable of the prodigal son. The son, having squandered everything, finds himself starving and feeding pigs, and the text says he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating. Those pods were carob. The fact that carob appears at the lowest point in the prodigal son's story, the moment of greatest hunger and desolation, tells you something about how it was perceived. It was survival food. The food you ate when there was nothing else. But the biology behind that survival role is remarkable. Carob pods are naturally sweet, requiring no added sugar, and they contain a type of fiber called carob gum or locust bean gum that has been studied extensively for its effects on digestion and metabolism. This fiber forms a slow-moving gel in the gut that flattens blood sugar response after meals, reduces the absorption of LDL cholesterol, and feeds beneficial bacteria in the colon. It is in many ways structurally similar to the beta-glucan found in barley, which has its own established clinical record for cardiovascular protection. Carob also contains tannins, specifically condensed tannins, which have documented anti-diarrheal properties. Ancient healers used carob preparation specifically for gastrointestinal infections and diarrhea, and research has confirmed that this application was pharmacologically sound. Carob tannins disrupt the adhesion of pathogenic bacteria to the gut wall and reduce fluid secretion that drives diarrheal illness. The food that the prodigal son could barely bring himself to eat was actually one of the most therapeutically complete fruits available in that world. Traditional preparation was pods dried and ground into flour for bread and porridge, pods eaten directly for their natural sweetness and fiber, and preparations made from the pods specifically for digestive complaints. The son who came home to his father deserved a feast, but the food he survived on while waiting was doing more for him than he understood. Number 8. Mulberry. The fruit that moved mountains in the words of Jesus. In Luke 17, Jesus says that if you have faith even as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, "Be uprooted and planted in the sea," and it would obey you. The mulberry tree is the specific image Jesus reaches for to describe something deeply rooted, structurally established, difficult to move. People who heard this parable knew exactly what a mulberry tree was. They had grown up with them. They had eaten from them. The mulberry was a deeply familiar feature of the ancient landscape of Israel. Mulberries, both red and black varieties, are among the most antioxidant-dense fruits ever measured. The dark pigment that stains everything it touches is anthocyanins, the same class of polyphenol compounds found in blueberries, blackberries, and pomegranates that have drawn serious research attention for their effects on brain health, cardiovascular protection, and inflammation regulation. Studies have found that mulberry extract produces meaningful reductions in blood sugar after meals through a mechanism involving inhibition of the enzyme that breaks down carbohydrates in the digestive tract. This effect is so pronounced that mulberry leaf extract has been investigated as a potential natural intervention for managing type 2 diabetes. Mulberries also contain resveratrol, the same compound found in grape skins that has been studied extensively for its potential cardiovascular and longevity effects. They deliver significant amounts of vitamin C, iron, and calcium in concentrations that made them genuinely valuable in a world without supplements. Traditional preparation was fresh fruit eaten directly from the tree, fruit dried and preserved for winter months, and juice pressed and used as both food and medicine. The tree Jesus chose to illustrate deep rootedness was providing deep nourishment to everyone who ate from it. Number 7. Pistachios. The nut a patriarch considered worthy of a king. In Genesis 43, Jacob sends his sons to Egypt to negotiate with the official who controls the grain supply during a devastating regional famine. They are going to ask for food for their family's survival, and Jacob tells them to bring gifts. Among those gifts are pistachios. Read that slowly. A man whose family is facing starvation chooses pistachios as something worth offering to an Egyptian ruler. That single detail tells you everything about how these nuts were valued. They were not a snack, they were currency-grade nutrition. Modern science has confirmed that the valuation was fully justified. Pistachios are unique among all nuts in their concentration of lutein and zeaxanthin, two carotenoids that are the primary protective compounds for the macula of the human eye. Regular pistachio consumption is now directly linked to reduced risk of age-related macular degeneration, one of the leading causes of blindness in aging populations worldwide. This is a finding that nutrition researchers take seriously. Pistachios contain more potassium per serving than most other nuts, which directly supports blood pressure regulation. Their essential amino acid profile is unusually complete for a plant food, but what genuinely surprises researchers studying gut health is what pistachios do to the microbiome. Clinical studies have shown that regular pistachio consumption significantly increases populations of beneficial bacteria in the colon, more effectively than most other nuts that have been tested. Jacob understood the value of what he was sending. Modern clinical research is still working through the full picture of why he was right. Traditional use was raw or lightly roasted nuts eaten as a daily nutrient source, ground into paste for cooking and spreading, pressed for oil used on the skin and in food preparation. Number 6. Almonds. The fruit that God built into the architecture of the sacred. When God instructed Moses on the design of the menorah, the sacred lampstand of the tabernacle, the cups were to be shaped like almond blossoms. When Aaron's rod miraculously budded overnight as a sign of divine authority, it produced almonds. The almond was chosen at multiple moments of theological weight, not as decoration, but as a symbol of watchfulness and life, because it is the first tree to flower each spring, blooming while everything else is still dormant. The people who chose this image were the same people who ate almonds every day and watched what they did to the body over a lifetime. Gram for gram, almonds are among the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. A single serving provides approximately 37% of the daily requirement for vitamin E in its most bioavailable form, the fat-soluble antioxidant that protects cell membranes from oxidative damage at the molecular level. Oxidative damage to cell membranes is directly implicated in aging, cardiovascular disease, and cancer development. Vitamin E from whole food sources is one of the primary defenses against it. Almonds are also high in magnesium, a mineral that participates in more than 300 enzymatic reactions in the human body and is deficient in a substantial portion of the modern population. Magnesium deficiency is linked to anxiety, poor sleep, high blood pressure, muscle cramping, and impaired glucose regulation. Clinical trials on almonds specifically have shown that regular consumption lowers LDL cholesterol, reduces post-meal blood sugar spikes, improves gut microbiome diversity, and supports healthy body weight by promoting satiety. The fat inside almonds is partially non-absorbable due to the structure of their cell walls, meaning some of it feeds gut bacteria rather than being stored. The ancient world built this fruit into the architecture of their most sacred spaces. That was not coincidence. Number 5. Figs. The fruit that healed a king and the prescription that modern biochemistry can explain. This one comes with a direct clinical prescription recorded in Scripture. In 2 Kings 20, King Hezekiah is dying from a severe infectious wound. The prophet Isaiah does not only pray, he gives a specific practical instruction. Take a cake of figs, he says, and apply it to the wound. They follow the instruction. The king recovers. For centuries, this was treated as either metaphor or miraculous coincidence. Then researchers began analyzing figs seriously and found that Isaiah's prescription had a precise biochemical basis. Figs contain an enzyme called phycin that breaks down dead and damaged tissue. It is cleaning a wound from the inside out in a process similar to pharmaceutical enzymatic debridement. They also contain compounds with documented antimicrobial properties, and the white latex that emerges from fresh, unripe figs has been shown in studies to inhibit bacterial growth and accelerate wound healing in the early inflammatory stage. Isaiah did not guess, he prescribed, and the prescription was pharmacologically defensible. As an internal food, figs are among the most mineral-dense fruits available. They are extraordinarily rich in soluble fiber, specifically pectin, that feeds and diversifies beneficial gut bacteria. They contain magnesium, potassium, calcium, and B vitamins in concentrations that made them, in a world without multivitamins, something close to a daily supplement. If you are finding this kind of content valuable, this is a good moment to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We post every week and every video goes deeper. Traditional preparation was fresh figs at peak ripeness for immediate nutrition, dried figs for preserved nutrition through winter, and mashed fresh fig paste applied directly to inflamed or infected skin. Either the prophet who prescribed them understood something about this fruit that took modern science thousands of years to confirm. Number 4, dates. The fruit that kept armies, pilgrims, and trading caravans alive. The date palm is referenced more times across biblical and ancient Near Eastern scripture than almost any other fruit-bearing tree. It was not celebrated because it was beautiful, though the imagery of the palm is woven throughout the Psalms and prophetic literature. It was celebrated because it kept people alive in some of the most hostile environments on Earth. Soldiers crossing desert terrain, traders covering hundreds of miles on foot. pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem across the Judean wilderness. What did all of them carry? Dates, calorie-dense, shelf-stable for months without any form of refrigeration, packed with rapidly absorbed natural sugars that refuel the body without the crash that follows refined sugar. But the clinical research on dates reveals something the ancient world could only have known through generations of observed outcomes. Multiple controlled trials have found that women who consume dates regularly in the final weeks of pregnancy experience significantly shorter labor times, better cervical outcomes at admission, and reduced need for medical interventions during delivery. Ancient midwives across the region prescribed dates for exactly this purpose. Modern obstetrics is now catching up to what they already knew. The polyphenols and tannins in dates also carry documented antimicrobial properties. The pits were ground into powder in traditional Arabic medicine for treating gastrointestinal infections. Even the part everyone throws away was being used therapeutically. Dates contain meaningful amounts of magnesium, potassium, copper, manganese, and B vitamins alongside their natural sugars. The fiber content moderates the glycemic response enough that the energy release is smooth and sustained rather than sharp and disruptive. Traditional use was 3 to 5 dates before physical work or travel, dried dates for preservation across seasons, and dates as the food used to break the Ramadan fast for over 1,000 years, because the body absorbs them after a long period without food in a way that is gentle and complete. Number 3, pomegranate, the fruit that decorated Solomon's temple and that oncologists are studying right now. The pillars of Solomon's temple were decorated with 200 carved pomegranates. The hem of the high priest's robe was bordered with them in blue, purple, and scarlet. In ancient Israelite culture, design choices in sacred spaces were never arbitrary. Every element carried meaning. The pomegranate appeared again and again because generation after generation, the people who ate it watched what happened and built that knowledge into the structures of their civilization. Pomegranates contain a compound called punicic acid found in almost no other food on Earth. They also contain a class of polyphenols called elegitannins that gut bacteria convert into compounds called urolithins. Urolithins have become one of the most actively researched areas in longevity science because they appear to activate mitophagy, the cellular process by which the body identifies damaged mitochondria, breaks them down, and replaces them with healthier, more functional versions. This matters because mitochondria are the energy source of every cell in your body. As they deteriorate, fatigue increases, muscular strength declines, and tissue resilience falls across every organ. Restoring that process at the cellular level is not a minor effect. Clinical research on pomegranate has found reductions in blood pressure, improvements in arterial elasticity, lower levels of LDL cholesterol oxidation, and reduced markers of systemic inflammation. Studies on pomegranate's effects on prostate cancer progression have produced results significant enough that oncology researchers at major institutions are actively investigating the mechanisms. Traditional use was fresh seeds eaten directly, juice pressed and consumed for concentrated polyphenol intake, and the dried rind, which carries even higher medicinal concentration than the interior, steeped as a tea for gut infections and inflammatory digestive conditions. They knew. The research is finally explaining how. Number 2, grapes. The fruit that appears 500 times in the most widely read book in human history. 500 times. The vine appears across the entirety of Scripture. Noah plants a vineyard as his first act after the flood. Grapes appear at the Passover table. They appear throughout the Song of Solomon. They are woven through the Psalms and the prophets. Jesus performs his first recorded miracle turning water into wine. He uses the vine as the central image of the Last Supper, and in John 15 he describes himself as the true vine in what theologians consider one of the most intimate self-descriptions in the New Testament. No plant except possibly the olive is more comprehensively present across the entire biblical narrative. The polyphenols in dark grapes and red wine, particularly resveratrol and a broader family of flavonoids concentrated in the skin and seeds, have been studied for decades in cardiovascular medicine and longevity research. The so-called French paradox, the observation that populations consuming traditional Mediterranean diets showed dramatically lower rates of heart disease than their saturated fat intake alone would predict, sent researchers looking for an explanation. What they found was the polyphenol profile of the grape. Clinical research shows that grape-derived compounds reduce LDL cholesterol oxidation, improve endothelial function, reduce platelet aggregation, lower inflammatory markers, and support overall cardiovascular health. Resveratrol has been studied for its potential role in cancer prevention, neuroprotection, and longevity pathways at the cellular level. And in 1 Timothy 5:23, Paul gives Timothy a direct medical instruction. Stop drinking only water, he writes, and use a little wine because of your stomach and your frequent illnesses. This was not cultural courtesy. This was a first-century physician recommending a specific preparation for a digestive and immune condition. The ancient world understood wine as medicine because the grape was always medicine first. Traditional use was fresh whole grapes for hydration and antioxidant intake, dried grapes for concentrated nutrition across seasons, and pressed juice for the full polyphenol profile of the skin. Number 1. Olives. The fruit that anointed kings, dressed wounds, and that modern cardiologists study most carefully of all. There is a reason olive oil is referenced more than 140 times in biblical scripture. Kings were anointed with it. Priests prepared it for the tabernacle lamps. The Good Samaritan in Luke 10 pours both oil and wine into a stranger's wounds as an act of deliberate medical care. Jesus spent his final night before the crucifixion in the Garden of Gethsemane, a name that in Hebrew literally means olive press. This was not symbolism chosen for aesthetic reasons. The olive ran through every dimension of ancient life because the people who lived that life understood that this fruit and its oil did something to the human body that nothing else could fully replicate. Extra virgin olive oil is now the most rigorously studied food in the history of nutritional science. The Mediterranean diet, which positions olive oil as its cornerstone, has been examined in hundreds of controlled clinical trials and consistently linked to dramatically reduced rates of cardiovascular disease, cancer, systemic inflammation, cognitive decline, type 2 diabetes, and all-cause mortality. These are among the most robust findings in all of nutritional epidemiology. The primary compound responsible for much of this is oleocanthal, a polyphenol that operates through essentially the same biochemical pathway as ibuprofen in reducing inflammation, producing the same anti-inflammatory effect without any of the pharmaceutical side effects. The throat-stinging sensation from a high-quality extra virgin olive oil is the oleocanthal activating the same receptors that ibuprofen targets. That sensation is the medicine working. Chronic low-grade inflammation is the underlying driver of most modern disease. A daily food that reduces it at the cellular level is not a small thing, but here is the distinction that changes everything about how you approach this fruit. Most of what is sold as olive oil in grocery stores today is not the same product the ancient world was using. Commercially produced olive oil is often harvested late when polyphenol content is at its lowest, blended with cheaper refined oils, and processed with heat that degrades the compounds that make it medicinal. What the ancient world pressed by hand in stone presses, cold immediately after harvest, was a living antioxidant-rich substance. The best modern equivalent requires finding cold-pressed, early harvest, extra virgin oil from a source that can verify its production chain. Some of the olive trees believed to be growing in the Garden of Gethsemane today are estimated to be over 2,000 years old. The same tree, the same fruit, the same oil. And study after study, conducted by the most rigorous cardiovascular and longevity researchers in the world, keeps arriving at the same conclusion that the people who tended those trees already knew. 10 fruits across thousands of years of human observation, every one of them pointing to the same truth. The people who ate this way were not primitive. They were paying extraordinary attention, and the evidence they accumulated was right. Tell me in the comments which fruit surprised you most. Was it the watermelon producing the same effect as blood pressure medication through a compound almost no other food contains? Was it the carob that the prodigal son survived on, which was doing something sophisticated for his gut and his blood sugar while he thought he was simply not starving? Or was it the olive, the fruit that appears at every significant moment in human history, that modern cardiologists now consider the most important single food for the aging heart? Drop your answer below. I read every single comment. If you are not subscribed yet, hit that button and the notification bell. We post every week, and the next video goes even deeper into what ancient wisdom got right about the human body. You do not want to miss it.